Hi, today we're going to get to look at a mobile radar truck used for weather research and storm chasing. This one's from the Center for Severe Weather Research in Boulder, Colorado. Let's go take a look. This is the Dow 7. You can see we've got the radar antenna pedestal mounted on the back, and then inside the vehicle there's both an operator's position and a coordinator's position, and all this is powered off a large generator that's on the bed of the truck. And if we look up out the top, there's this porthole where we can see the telescoping mast, and then this is the driver's area where all the truck leveling takes place.
So if we were actually operating right now versus just showing off, we've got all of these different screens all around us, and they're duplicated on both sides of the truck. So this is generally the operator's seat, and this is generally the coordinator's seat. So operator's seat, you've got the NGen computer right here, which displays all the data, does all the data recording. It's the biggest, most powerful computer in here. It's a rack mount server right behind this chair here. So it's currently got 5 terabytes of storage space, RAID 6, just for the redundancy's sake. And it's great. It shows us what's going on inside the storm. It's collecting time series and door raids and CF radials so that we can go back and analyze them. Then this computer is our antenna computer. So we've got a GUI-based program that allows us to tell the antenna where to go. That talks with this back here with a whole bunch of PMAX and all sorts of servo amps and other fun stuff to power the 2 big brushless motors that control elevation and azimuth for the antenna. So that's a pretty fun program. All of these are synchronized time-wise with this NTP over here. This gets GPS time, and basically it's kind of funny. It's like asking, hey, what time it is? What time is it? Okay, I'll set my clock to that. Hey, what time is it? Okay, I'll set my clock to that. Constantly. So then we've got a navigation computer slash note-taking computer right here for the operator. The operator would be perhaps tracking the movement of the storm and relaying that to the coordinator such that we can find roads to deploy on, coordinate with the other trucks to get the data and get to places where we can deploy. This computer in the back is our Drx Computer. This is what allows us to send out different pulses, whether it's a 200 nanosecond pulse, no stagger with 15-meter gates, or a 1000 nanosecond pulse, 4 or 5 stagger, 1000 PRF with 150-meter gates. So we have full control of the transmitter from this computer here. The transmitter is behind and underneath me. It's got all sorts of shiny stuff in it, magnetrons and just super fun stuff. The oscilloscope up here allows us to visualize the pulses when we're actually operating. We're not sending out any pulses currently, but normally we'd have a little square wave or two up there showing us what kind of energy we're sending out. Let's see. That about does it on this side. On the coordinator's side, there's also the weather instruments computer. So we have some anemometers and TRH and pressure transducers that allow us to see what's going on right here at the truck. Because the radar is really good at seeing what's going on way over there, but we can't really see what's happening right here unless we have instruments on the truck. The coordinator also has a navigation computer and would be in charge of tracking all the other vehicles, which is what the tracking computer does. It simply picks up all the GPS points from the other trucks that have locator beacons on them.
So who is responsible for getting the truck level to do data collection?
So that's going to be the driver's job. If Josh and Karen are back here in the back, I'm going to be the driver. If I'm back here in the back. I'm still probably the driver. I just have to juggle both. But the driver has control of the PTO, power takeoff system, which basically grabs some power off of the transmission from the engine, and then sends that to some hydraulic, can't think of what that's called, some hydraulics that allow us to lift all 26,000 pounds off the ground. And then we have digital inclinometers on the computer in the front, which is also the weather instruments computer, that record such that if we wanted to record data while we're on the move, we could go back and post-process to get the data level, but also allow us to go back and make sure that all of our systems were level the entire time that we were recording.
So inside here is the transmitter, and that's actually the component that creates the electromagnetic pulse. This is a very high power pulse burst of energy. It's microwave radiation at X-band, so 3.2 centimeter wavelength radiation. So that radiation comes down through here, through the gray tube. Here's this rusty box here. There's lots of electronics in here. It's very critical. One of the components is the transmit and receive switch. So the transmitted power is many orders of magnitude stronger than the received power. So if you leaked any of your transmitted power into the electronics in there from the receiver, you would fire. So you don't want to do that. So there's some very important switches in here that help make that separate between the transmit and receive. So then it continues out from here to the bottom of the pedestal, comes up to the backside of the antenna here. So the two waveguides then come around inside the dish. Go along the support struts to that center piece. The tube there is called the feed horn. The energy comes out of that, is reflected into the dish, and that dish then reflects the energy out to the atmosphere. So the energy goes out at the speed of light, and whatever it hits, the rain, snow, hail, bugs, birds, airplanes, that energy, some of it is reflected back. The dish collects it, sends it back into the feed horn. The energy goes right back down through the pipes and into the computer system, so they process it real time to display.
All right, so you said this was dual pole. It had the two waveguides going to the feed horn.
Yeah, so there's two different waveguides. One of them is for the horizontal polarized wave, and the other one's for the vertically polarized wave. So polarization is basically just the way the electric field vector oscillates as the wave is propagating. So I like to tell the kids that the horizontally polarized wave oscillates back and forth like this, like a snake, and then the vertically polarized wave oscillates up and down like this, like a dolphin in the water. And so it sends out both at the same time. So we can use that information to tell the shapes of the particles. And so for instance, a raindrop, or very large raindrops, get deformed by aerodynamic drag and become like hamburger bun shapes. If you always see them drawn as teardrops, that's not correct. What actually happens is they get deformed like this and they get kind of flat, or what we call oblate. And so by having the two different signals, we can measure the difference in the dimensions between the horizontal dimension of the drop and the vertical dimension of the drop. Using that information, we can then tell the size of the raindrops and distinguish raindrops that are oblate like this from more spherical targets such as like hailstones and snowflakes and whatever else we can look at. So we can distinguish between all those different types and see where they are in a storm.
And this is, I mean, radars are sensitive instruments, so you can even see things like bugs and butterfly migrations.
Yes, absolutely. So just recently, at this time of year, we do have some bird migrations that come through, and so at night we've been actually seeing bird migrations on the radar. So basically, once the sun sets and all the turbulent mixing of the boundary layer dies down a bit, the birds get up and start flying. And so yeah, we can pick up birds, we can pick up bugs, we can actually distinguish between birds and bugs with this type of radar. And we can distinguish between those non-meteorological targets, such as birds and bugs, or say fire, smoke, things like that, and actual precipitation. So it's really useful for separating out what meteorologists want to look at and what the non-meteorologists want to look at.
All right, so you've been using the Dow as part of your classes.
Yes.
What's one of the things that you really want students to get out of this?
Well, mainly I want them to just get experience using a really first-rate piece of equipment, and I want them to have the experience in collecting their own data and then being able to analyze it later. Because I think it builds an entirely different level of enthusiasm for what you're doing. You're actually out there and you're making the decisions about how you're going to collect data on this front or yourself. It's a really great experience for them.
Right, I'm sure, and you really get kind of attached to the data.
Yeah, exactly. You have ownership of the data because they can scan however they want when they're in there. So they decide if they want PPIs, if they want RHIs, and so later when they go back and look at it, it means a lot more because they remember why they decided they wanted RHIs, what they're trying to look for in it. So yeah, it's great.
So what's one of the big advantages of having a mobile radar like this as compared to something like, the golf balls, the WSR-88Ds that we see?
Right. Well, so the radar was really put on the truck originally for storm chasing because the radar beam gets wider and wider the farther you go from the radar. And so you get a much more blurry picture of what's going on. So being able to put it on a truck and take it to the phenomenon is a real game changer when you have these small scale phenomena like a tornado. But since then, it's been used for lots of other things too, like lighting up snow and cloud seeding experiments and hurricanes, all kinds of things.
So since we're in the middle of Pennsylvania in fall, what are some of the phenomena that you explored with the classes with the radar?
Well, we had, last week we had a nice line of cells that came through, so that was great. They were like nice individual cells, so I think maybe there's even some rotation in one of them. And then there was a front that came through, so there was a lot of prefrontal precipitation and then the actual, some sampling of the actual front itself. So those are the kind of things you usually get this time of year, like some narrow cold frontal things going on.
So you're using this radar in your classes.
Yes.
What are some of the things that you really want your students to get out of it?
So when we teach them about how radar works and how you have to decide on your design for your experiment and your scanning strategies, it's difficult to put that into practice. If you're writing on the chalkboard things about the maximum unambiguous velocity, maximum unambiguous range, and how they're related, you can sort of memorize the formula, but to actually see it in real time happening at your fingertips when you change that scanning strategy. So that's what we want them to get, that hands-on experience, seeing how their decisions improves the data quality, and basically just get them to design their own experiment, collect the data, then analyze that data that they collected from start to finish.
So you've actually been taking the students out into the field here.
We have, yes. We made 3 deployments. Last week we did 2, and then we did 1 earlier this week. And we've collected an incredible data set. I was looking at it last night. Very, very happy with what we got. We're going to be using that data in class actually to show a bunch of different points about the polarization radar and the different signatures and things like that that you see.
All right. So what kind of data volumes do you get?
That's a great question. So there's different types of data that you can collect. What we're doing is collecting what's called time series, which is the most basic fundamental level of data. It's also the largest volume of data. So we've got several multi-terabyte disks in here that we're using. If I had to put a number, I'm not exactly sure how much we have. It's on the order of 6 to 7 terabytes so far out of the 3 deployments that we did. But yeah, I think usually several hundred gigabytes an hour depending on what type of scan we're doing.
So this isn't just a platform for the students to learn about radar, it's also a platform to learn about computing and how to deal with.
Absolutely, big data. Exactly. So they will be using this data, so they're going to have to learn how to read it in and efficiently go through it and plot the stuff that they want to see and discard the noise and all that. So it's a very multifaceted project that they're going to have to engage on here pretty soon.
That's great. That's what you have to do in the real world.
Absolutely, yeah. And dealing with radar data is always a pain because there's always different formats and different conventions and things like that. So this first-hand experience, I actually get to see all that.
So what tools do you use to look at the data? Are these MATLAB or?
So yeah, at the department we have licenses with MATLAB and IPL, and so I got codes and I've used both of those in the past. There's actually some really nice source tools with Python right now that people are starting to use, which is really nice. There's a few canned programs that are specifically made for reading radar data that's available from the National Center for Atmospheric Research. We've also got those here at Penn State. And so there's going to be a variety of different tools, and people can kind of see what they like and use the best. Each has their strengths and weaknesses, but that's part of the fun. The students can actually maybe write their own codes to read in several formats as well.
So where did this radar come from, and why is it so special? Why is it such a big deal to have it here?
So it's based out of the Center for Severe Weather Research, which is in Boulder, Colorado. And so Traeger, the driver, drove all the way out by himself over the weekend, last 2 weekends ago. So he came out here. And it's really special because we don't have one here at Penn State. There's actually not one anywhere near here. We're usually out in the plains chasing tornadoes. So a lot of the students have seen them on TV, have seen them on special like PBS documentaries about tornado chasing and tornado science. They've never actually got to sit behind the controls and use it themselves. So they're all just really pumped up about it. And we've been having a great time.
So now they're going to collect some data, but unfortunately the pedestal has had a little malfunction and the dish doesn't move correctly. So it's just going to be pointed straight up and collect some vertical profiles. But first, the waveguides have to be pressurized.
Actually goes through the waveguide versus just arcing around inside. So we've got this nice little pressurization system and then a pulse trigger pulse interlock that basically talks with the Drx Computer and the pressure to make sure that it's safe to actually turn on the transmitter. If we don't have green lights here, even if we flip the switches, nothing will happen because otherwise you would create basically a plasma arc that would travel through the waveguides and blow everything up.
So what pressure do you run this at?
Let's see, it's about 20... Oh, it looks like it's about 30 psi right now, which is on the high side. I think our switches are rated for 25 to 27 psi or something to that effect. But there are probably some losses in the system as you travel back. So that's likely safe. You get this little line right there.
It's green, so it's about in the negatives, but that's probably what you'd expect. The control here.
The other keyboard. There you go.
So see how crazy this looks.
It's running really slowly too for whatever reason. So.
All right, so what do you guys think about having the radar here?
I think it's fantastic to have this here, and I'm a senior, so this is my last semester here, so to be able to work with the Dow and get put at an advantage where we learn so much about it, I think that it's fantastic.
Yeah, you said the Dow usually, with the NSF grant that it's on, they usually have funding availability to go to schools every 2 years or so, but for us here, I know it hasn't been here in the past 10 years.
10 years.
It's been at least since 2003 or 2004, so it's amazing that we finally got to come here now. I'm a senior too. I'm not graduating this semester, but next semester, so the fact that it was able to come out my last year, that was really great.
Really exciting.
So you guys have got to go out and collect data with it and work with real radar data now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And our professor, Dr. Kumjan, he actually said that he saw a tornado vortex signature in the last data set that we collected. I don't think there was a tornado touchdown at all, but just to see that in the actual data was just phenomenal. It's the best high resolution radar you can get.
When I went out, we got to see some very subtle things like Kelvin Humboldt's instability in the top of the front that was moving through. You got to see the melting layer, or bright band, that was pretty interesting. Dr. Kumjan was really excited about that.
Great. So you guys are doing this as part of a class?
Yes.
What class is it? Is it radar? Is it mesoscale?
Radar meteorology.
And
I went for
mesoscale.
mesoscale.
Okay.
The radar class also hasn't been offered in a long time too, so the fact that they coincided, which maybe isn't as much of a coincidence as you might think, but it's amazing that the two got to work together.
So when you guys went in the field, what did you do when you were collecting the radar data?
Well, I think we kind of, when we first went out, we talked as a group as to what type of scans we would like to do. There's PPIs and RHIs. So PPIs are basically what you see on a normal radar image. It just goes around and gets like a general town, a certain range. Whereas the RHIs kind of like go up and down, and it gets like a cross section of the storm. So we had to collaborate on what we'd like to do for the storm that was moving through when we were there that day.
And while we were in the truck, we also took notes and measurements and basically like altered the frequencies and things every 15 minutes or so just to make sure that everything was in order. We also had to do scans, they're called Birdbath Scan, because when the dish goes up like this, then it looks like a bird bath. Kind of funny, that's actually what they call it out in the field, and that's just for, what are they called?
I think it's to like recalibrate.
Recalibration,
the system.
yeah.
So did you guys learn anything about working with real data sets and real problems in the field when you went out as compared to the 88Ds that are constantly running and generally pretty reliable?
Yeah, absolutely. Like online, they smooth it out a lot, the WSR 88D data that's available to the public. And if you look online on weather.com, that's what you see. But this stuff is really high resolution, and there's also a lot of, blank spots. Lots of black in the data because data is not perfect in the real world. Whereas online, when they smooth it all out for you on weather.com and stuff like that, it all looks clean. It's really good. So it's those discontinuities that sometimes give you insights into things that you don't see otherwise.
And I think to have like a hands-on experience to be able to actually use the radar and see where from and the thought that goes into thinking about how you want to get your data, that's really, really cool.
It's invaluable experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you guys gain all kinds of new computer skills and things from this, I'm assuming, as well, or was it pretty much things you've already done?
Yeah, well, the interface was pretty friendly, actually.
Okay.
But actually operating it ourselves, now we can go back in there and basically just run a whole scan.
Yeah.
Just each visit thing.
I think the first time you jump in there, you're like, whoa, but once you get behind like the computer and you start working with it, it's very friendly.
Yeah, it's literally just clicking, knowing what to click, and like putting different numbers in different fields. It looks a little intimidating at first, but it's actually very user-friendly.
I'll just say that we're really grateful to the National Science Foundation for providing an opportunity to do educational deployments like this. So when the really first-rate instruments like this aren't out on a field project, we can take them and expose students and the public to them.
Thank you for watching, and I hope you found this to be an interesting view behind the scenes with the Doppler on Wheels.